want to do 1 minute to tell us a little about yourself and why you're running again.
Many of y'all know me. My name is Michael Lee. My wife and I have 4 children. Heidi's over there. Some of you may know Sawyer Lee, who's probably, I'm glad I'm not running against him because he would probably win. I've lived in New Hanover County on and off since 1986, but most recently since 2000, and my wife and I have raised our children here. I've served in a lot of capacities, nonprofit boards, the Port Authority, DOT, and in a lot of other areas. I think I told y'all 2 years ago when we got together, my father's from Taiwan, so usually it's not appropriate. We grew up, not wanting to be boastful unless it's about your kids, and they can never know. So if I say something nice about my kids, don't tell them. But today I'm going to try a little harder. You're going to hear me reference some things from 15, 16, 17, and 18 because we didn't get here overnight. It requires advanced planning for infrastructure and other things. We run every 2 years, so sometimes people are very reactive. I like to be proactive and plan for the future, and so you're going to hear me say some of those things, and that's why I'm going to reference some of those, and I've got the red card.
Marcia.
First of all, thank you all for giving us this opportunity. As stated, I have not held public office, unless you call being part of a homeowners association, that's a whole different plan. I am a former teacher at preschool, at public schools. While I was getting my doctorate at Ohio State, I taught at Smith College, and I taught ROTC at Berkeley. So I've had some very unique experiences in that realm. I've also worked from very underprivileged to very privileged, run the gamut there. The 25 years that I spent in the military gave me the opportunity to live and work in 4 different countries, see how other people live, see how other governments work, and I think that those give me a level of experience that is a little bit different. I also believe that education is a service industry, military is a service industry, politics should be a service industry, and that's why I want to run.
Okay, and let's start off broadly like we did with a question to the House candidates, and Marcia, you'll begin. But when you look at state funding, what areas would you advocate for increasing or decreasing?
Well, since you already know I was a teacher, I'm going to have to say education. Yes, we need to increase teacher pay. We need to show them the respect that they deserve for the job that they are doing. We need to increase the funding of schools. We need to improve per pupil spending. We need to have better preschool programs. From my time at Head Start, I became very much aware of how much just the ability to be well nourished has an impact on the young children. We need to make sure that they are properly prepared to begin their education. So my focus will primarily be on improving education across the board.
And Michael.
Early childhood, mental health, and education generally. Although we've been increasing education funding every single year, I think it was $2.5 billion in the last biennium out of a $27 billion budget. We need to be increasing it not just for general education, but also in the area of teacher pay. We've been doing that as well. But like I said earlier, we created the Pepsi Commission, which is really looking about how we compensate our teachers, licensure, so that we're not just paying the best teacher and the worst teacher the same amount of money. And so as we move forward, we really need to be looking at not just how much money we spend, but how we spend it, and also are we getting the outcomes that we want to get. And so that's why we're not just working on increasing funding, although we need to do that, we're also looking at other areas and planning for the future on how we can do better.
Okay, and Michael, starting with you. Republicans control the House and Senate in North Carolina, but not enough currently to override vetoes from Governor Roy Cooper. And that dynamic has been a part of how the state legislature has functioned in the past several years and the measures that have passed and not passed. If a supermajority changes in this election, how does that change your plans and strategies for what you advocate for?
It doesn't change my plans at all. I work across the aisle. I mentioned that 2 years ago. We didn't have a budget before I came in. We ended up having a budget. A lot of that had to do with working across the aisle. Education, the superintendent was in litigation with the school board statewide. You have the legislature in litigation with the governor's office. And I said, hey, why don't we create a commission where we have everyone come around the table, because you can't negotiate or talk to each other in litigation. And I said, let's create something, a commission. And we created what was called the Huntley Commission through the Hunt Institute. We had the lieutenant governor, the governor's office, the Republican superintendent, the Democrat school board chair. We had early childhood. We had Democrat senators, House members, and the other party of both chambers. And we all got together for a year, even though there was litigation going on. And we came up with a report of how we can improve education in North Carolina, signed by the governor's office, signed by the lieutenant governor, by all of the people on the commission, 100% bipartisan, from early childhood. The president of the UNC system, the community college was on there. These are the things that I want to accomplish. It has nothing to do with majorities or supermajorities.
Thank you. And Marcia?
The thing that I'm concerned about is if they do get a supermajority, they're going to enact the things that they've already told us they're going to do. They're going to put in a ban on abortion. They've kind of let it be known that they will come after other individual rights, whether it's against the LGBTQ community, against its other minorities. So my concern is that we need to continue to have some level of balance. Yes, I will work across the aisle with anyone, anywhere, who is willing to sit down and talk, go have a drink, go have dinner. I would love that opportunity. But I am very concerned if that happens.
We have time for a rebuttal. Michael, if you want to start.
I read an op-ed on September 3rd that said, and I'm sure this is a question, that I think you should have the right to an abortion in the first trimester, and after that, exceptions for rape, incest, viability of the fetus, and life of the mother. And yet there are these television ads telling you just the opposite. Senator Pro Tem, the leader in the Senate, said he believes in 15 weeks, over 3 months, with exceptions for rape, incest, fetal viability, and life of the mother. So very similar to mine. So when the leaders of our state get on television and say things that are completely not true, that you can verify that were stated 2 weeks earlier, I'm not just concerned about, what bills pass and don't pass. I'm concerned about our ability to continue forward as a democracy. The highest leader in our state is saying things that are completely untrue, verifiable, on the op-ed I wrote, I think it was September 3rd. These ads came out 2 weeks later. That's what we should be concerned about in this room, in our state, not a supermajority.
And Marcia, your turn. Marcia, you have time to respond?
Yes, I would. It's very convenient that the change in position within the Republican Party and from my opponent occurred after the polling came out that was a major issue. There have been some red herrings that have been put out to try and anger people about abortion. One of them is that the far left is for abortion up to the minute of birth. There is no such thing. That is a red herring. That is to inflame people. It is very difficult for a woman to know that she is pregnant in 15 weeks. Many times women are just not aware at that point. So I think that we definitely have to go back and look at what is really the right thing to do, and that is that each woman should have the right to make her own decision about her own life with her physician, with her faith, and with her family.
Let's move to this specific issue. Michael, starting with you. This week, the governor asked the legislature to consider not having the student loan forgiveness monies that some people received, not making that taxable income. And that's an issue that other states are taking up as well. What's your opinion on that?
I haven't formulated a final opinion on it yet because I don't know what the impact is to the state of North Carolina. I do know that there are significant issues with loan forgiveness when it comes to student loan debt. and that's just something we're going to have to work through. In North Carolina, what we do when we come back into the General Assembly is we look at coupling and decoupling from whatever the federal government is going to do. We typically look at that on an economic basis, on what it means to North Carolina, how much is it going to cost, and what's the impact. I would have preferred a loan forgiveness that was done in a different way, a forgivable loan program or something like that, so that we can incent some of our high-need industries and provide it like that. So we may end up doing something like that. But I don't know yet because we haven't met on it, and until we meet as a General Assembly, part of that is seeing what our other colleagues feel, Democrats and Republicans. A lot of times people think that just because one person says something, it is what it is. But we actually think through these things and do the research and the study and find out fiscal impacts before we make decisions. Some people don't do that. They just make a decision like that based on politics.
I think, first of all, I would say that the whole student loan program needs to be revamped before you ever get to the point where you're talking about loan forgiveness. The fact that we have people who can pay off a house mortgage before they can pay off their student loan debt shows us that there is something wrong with that program. That's not what was addressed, however. I agree with the general concept of loan forgiveness in order to allow adults who have trying to be fully functioning adults contributing to their community, that we need to address that in some way. As I said, on the just basis of the concept, yes, I'm in favor of it, but would have to agree with Michael Lee that we need to study it and make sure we're doing it the right way.
See, we can agree on things.
We can.
If we talk.
We discussed transportation funding earlier as an issue. Marcia, starting us off, what are your ideas in terms of how to address critical road infrastructure and improvements as DOT revenue is declining?
So to address which?
Transportation, critical transportation issues, particularly in our region.
One of the things that I would like to make sure we do, everyone is talking about building the bridge and why they're built in other communities and not here. President Biden's infrastructure bill is going to give us some opportunities for grant money that can be applied to the different projects. I think we need to take a look at within our local area using, making better use of public transportation. And I would say that really across the board. Having lived in other parts of the country that have very strong public transportation, I know how easy it is to get around and how much it helps the problem with traffic. There are, we've talked about the EV, the electronic vehicles, and what that would do to help our environment. We need to continue to address how we will provide the funding through the tax structure. It's going to have to be modified as we change from gas to electronics.
Michael?
So as y'all know, the highway fund, we fund through gas tax, DMV fees, and it's not a general fund appropriation. Typically, we use the STI, which is a data-driven policy to find out where we make improvements. The bridge was an issue when I was on DOT, I think in 2013, because the local leaders in the MPO couldn't really determine where they wanted to go and how they wanted to get there. And we on DOT, I was on the board at the time, were very frustrated with that process. I think some of that's gone on again. And we could have a whole discussion on that particular issue. In North Carolina, we have spent more money on transportation. We are looking at alternative funding sources. One thing we did in the last legislative session is we're taking 2% of sales tax, which gets almost, I think, $170 million in this next biennium, and then it goes to 4% and then 6%, so that hopefully we're going to be approaching, if sales tax continues to increase with revenues, almost $1 billion of extra funding outside of the gas tax and some of those other fees. As far as transit goes, I haven't been a huge proponent of transit, but I have been supportive of Wilmington's effort because it might be one form of transit that might actually work, and that's why we've been providing supplemental funding in the legislature for studies to see how that's going to work and really trying to be a partner because we think Wilmington's really doing a good thing in that regard.
Want to move on to the film grant program that is used by the film industry, both here and in other parts of the state. What's your stance on the current program? Do you think there are any changes that should be made to it or kept as it is?
Whose question?
For Michael to start, sorry.
When I got in the legislature, I tripled the film grant, and then what we did was make it permanent. Why is that important? Called permanent non-recurring. It's because when we didn't have a budget for 2 years, because it was permanent, it continued. If I had not done that in 2017, it would have disappeared for 2 years. We have about $31 million every single year. That's $62 million every biennium. We have $98 million sitting there right now. That $98 million is encumbered and will be going out in the 2022 fiscal year. We've had some of the strongest film numbers that we've seen in our area in quite a long time. I think it's over $400 million of economic development. I support the film program, but we need to continue looking at it. We tweaked the language to lower the thresholds for certain productions to qualify. I think that helped quite a bit. I work with the film industry and the Film Commission to see how we need to tweak the language. It's not always about money. How we can tweak the language to make it easier and more beneficial to attract the type of productions we want to see here that can maintain a stable crew base.
And Marcia?
I absolutely support anything that we can do to bring the film industry back. It is a wonderful, it's a fun thing to have, but it's also very beneficial to our economy. I would expand it, though, to say that as we look at attracting businesses to our area, we need to do a better job of developing a package that fits that particular industry. That what would entice one group might not be beneficial to another, so that we can go into whether it's a grant, whether it's a stipend, whether it's a locality, whether it's an office space, whether it's a trained and educated community. But to look at each business that we are talking about bringing into our area and making sure that we are offering the right combination of factors that gives them a good deal and gives the community a positive reaction.
And staying with incentives and starting with Marcia, those state performance-based incentives that have been a part of many deals lately around the state, including locally, such as the Live Oak announcement about its expansion. On those types of approaches for state performance-based incentives, what are your thoughts on whether any changes are needed and how the state utilizes those or not?
I think that as we look at performance incentives, that one of them certainly should be in the area of, I'll say, a tax incentive, that if a company brings in a certain number of employees at a certain level of pay, that they would get a tax break that would go along with that. That if they are partnering with our community college or with UNCW in a particular way that helps to train a workforce, that there again would be an opportunity to give them a little bit more of an incentive if they are helping to support the nursing program that Leanne was talking about. These are all things that we can do as a community that will help us work together.
Michael?
In 2020, I mentioned to you that the JDIG program and the One North Carolina program were not working for areas like ours. All the money was going to Meck, Wake, Guilford. And so we revised that program in 17-18, I along with Senator Brown. And now you've seen some of the first JDIG and One North Carolina grants coming here with Live Oak and others that we haven't seen in a very, very long time. But it's not just about that, it's about infrastructure. In 2000, I think it was, because I'm going to look at my notes, 2017, Senator Rabin and I created the airport fund, $12 million, and just this last year went to the airport. You see all the economic development there. I was the chair of the Port Authority in 2015 when I went in the legislature. We started funding, because our state did not fund the ports for capital, we started funding $35 million a year. The next biennium we went to $45 million a year, and just recently we invested $232 million as the state match for the deepening. It's not just about incentives, those are important, but we've got to plan the infrastructure, and we've been doing that every step of the way.
Okay, and we have a question from the audience that relates to public education and the Leandro plan. And that is, what is your stance on how to support or implement the Leandro plan in North Carolina in terms of funding for public schools? Starting with Michael.
Is that mine?
Oh,
Michael.
So the Leandro plan, for those of you who know, in the late 90s, 4 counties, low-wealth counties, sued the state and said, you're not providing a sound basic education. The litigation has been going on ever since then. And it's between primarily the administration. It's spanned Republicans, Democrats, governors, legislatures. There are pieces of the Leandro plan that actually have been implemented, whether it's elevated teaching roles or some of the other ones. This was a plan crafted in a static environment by a consulting group out of California. And that's maybe not a bad thing, But because it's static, it doesn't evolve, which is why I got together on the Huntley Commission and we sat down together and worked out our own plan for the state of North Carolina that we all could agree on. And we are probably going to have a Huntley Commission 2.0. And what we said was, hey, let's just do all those things we know we agree on. Let's do what works, especially in the areas of early childhood where we need to make significant investments. And let's move forward with that. And this is what I'm going to be working on next year. The thing that everybody agrees on, the governor, lieutenant governor, the state board, superintendent, schools of education. These are the things that we're going to do.
And Marcia?
The courts have already decided that the Leandro plan should be enacted, and yet we're still dragging our feet. The funding is there. There is enough money in the coffers of the state that will more than adequately make that happen. To me, it's an opportunity to move forward, whether or not we could discuss which one has greater value for the children, but this should be a bipartisan issue. The education of our children should be a bipartisan issue. As we go through things, we're going to have the same goals in mind. We're going to have different approaches of how we get there. The art of the deal is in talking to each other and figuring out what are the best parts and putting them together so that we come up with a quality product at the end.
Okay, and Marcia, starting with you, what are your thoughts on water quality or PFAS measures or legislations that might come up?
I think that we absolutely have to do a much better job than we have been in the past. One of the things that struck me as far as Comores and in the past was that the DEQ had a funding cut that caused them to have to lose some of their manpower that could have been used to go out and inspect the water, to do the testing. What we need to do is to bulk up not only the manpower of DEQ, but give them the authority to go out and fine people, that we put teeth in what they can do, and make the fines to the point that it hurts. That if there is a corporation that is poisoning us, that they are going to feel the pain of it by the fines that they have to pay. There was a hearing yesterday from Comores, and I was stunned that they were talking about, well, our future products, and yet they're killing us with what they're putting into us right now.
Michael?
The Water Safety Act 1.0, I talked about last time I was here, gave the authority to shut down polluters and do all kinds of other stuff. I don't want to kind of rehash that. When I was here, I said I would implement Water Safety Act 2.0. We did that. And what did that do? That invested probably over $40 million into PFAS research, a testing network that goes around our state utilizing our universities. I think someone mentioned we don't have enough toxicologists and epidemiologists and others within DEQ, so we developed a program through the collaboratory to actually embed university professors within DEQ. They're actually working there full time and they're going to rotate between the different specialties. We've invested locally to address some of the mitigation efforts we've had to do because the lawsuits and the consent order haven't proved as fruitful as we would have liked. So the state brought in $32 million, I believe it was, to the Cape Fear Water and Sewer Authority last year. We've invested over $23 million into the lower Cape Fear Water and Sewer Authority, different than the Cape Fear Water and Sewer Authority. So we're doing things in a lot of different ways. Water Safety Act 2.0, invest another $10 million on a technology that can, in the lab, pulls out 100% of PFAS. And now there's research on how to break down the forever chemical, so it's not a forever chemical anymore that they're doing at UNC Charlotte. Amazing things have occurred because of the Water Safety Act.
Okay, we're going to have to call time on that, Michael.
Yes, ma'am.
And then also a very coastal issue as well. Michael, starting with you, what, if anything, at the legislative level would you advocate for in terms of hurricane resiliency or response that would be important for this region?
I actually, one of the last things I did before I left office was sign the Hurricane Florence relief bill. Usually it's signed by the President Pro Tem or the Lieutenant Governor, but because it really hit our area so hard, I ended up signing that bill. The problem that we have is there are still people from 2018 that still don't have a place to live. It is amazing how the bureaucracy, the money was there. It's amazing because we had a rainy day fund of billions of dollars we were able to implement, and that's why we had it. And so now we've actually formed a subcommittee to find out why the administration can't get the money out, can't get people into homes. If you go across southeastern North Carolina, not just in our area, you're going to see it's even worse from Hurricane Matthew and other hurricanes. So we're going to have to figure it out. I don't have the silver bullet. We've thrown money at it. Money wasn't, the money was enough, but it's not how much you spend, it's how you spend it. And so now in the General Assembly,
Okay,
we're
we're
working
gonna
on
have to
a
call
way to
time
do
on that,
that.
especially since we went a couple seconds over on the last one. Marcia?
One of the big points that I think is very true is the issue of bureaucracy. That I think that one of the things that we need to address is where the bureaucracy occurs. There's too many situations where we've always done it this way, and it's time to look for creative ways, new ways, innovative ways to get things done within a governmental process. In terms of this specific entity, there is money in the rainy day fund, and perhaps it's up to the state to say, it's taking so long to get the FEMA money released, let's use the money that we have so that we can get these people in homes. There's a problem now in finding contractors and finding materials to actually do the work. So we're running behind tremendously. If these things could have been accomplished 4 and 5 years ago, we'd have a lot more people back in their homes.
Again, we agree.
Okay, and so that's going to close out our time with the state Senate candidates, but to leave us with their final words, Marcia, you can start and let us know what makes you uniquely qualified to hold this seat.
As I said before, I have a number of years teaching experience at all levels, all age groups, all ability levels. I have been in 4 different countries, living and working with civilian workforces as well as the military. And I think that within those experiences, I have an opportunity to be the voice for all of the people within this district, not just a select few, but that what I can do is talk to people through the breadth and depth of the knowledge that I have.
Thank you. And Michael?
Leadership and experience. I've been on multiple boards and commissions. I've been in the legislature. I've served on a variety of nonprofits. My experience in this community runs deep. Leadership, I've been able to work on legislation to not just help our area and funding in our area. In the last budget, I think we had $400 million of non-recurring one-time money. Doesn't include the universities, doesn't include the community college, doesn't include a lot of those recurring type funding items. If you were to include that, you're going to be talking over $500 million to our area in the biennium. Leadership, bringing people together. I mentioned the Huntley Commission. That's just one example because I think some of you would recognize Governor Hunt's name. Imagine that, a Republican working with Democrats. My co-chair was Howard Lee, so it made it nice, the Huntley Commission. He's a former Democrat senator, and I've gotten to know him. Bringing people together, leadership and experience, that's what I bring to our area, and I'd really appreciate the opportunity to continue my work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of you who showed up for your thoughtful questions.